think the United Church of Christ minister Michael Dowd gets an A+ for his catchy book title, Thank God for Evolution. The book is about understanding God within a modern framework of the scientific worldview. He offers a framework for appreciating two different ways of understanding our world. He calls it day language and night language. Dowd writes, "There are two complementary sides of the coin of our experience. On one side is the real, or what's so, the facts, the objectively real, that which is publicly and measurably true. Let's call this side of our experience the day experience. The other side of our experiential coin is called night experience. It's communicated through night language, the way of grand metaphors, poetry, and vibrant images. Day language and night language, both important, provide complementary ways of describing our world and our human experience. Day language, the language of science, shapes our physical lives. It allows us to build modern homes and drive cars and eat nutritious food. The medicines we take, even the clothes on our back, are the fruit of measurement and scientific innovation. Without sharing factual scientific knowledge, our lives would be so very different, probably poorer. And our human lives wouldn't be human at all without night language, the expression of emotion, imagination, and wonder. Technology is not everything, after all. Imagine life without music or art. Imagine life without the capacity to say, I love you, or without the metaphors and expressions to convey what love even means. These two ways of knowing don't just contain different information, they function in completely different ways, like different alphabets. The information of day language fits together seamlessly like a giant map. New information has to fit with existing information. There's no room for contradiction. If a new piece of information contradicts the way we previously thought, then the whole picture has to be adjusted, or someone has to figure out the special glue to fit that piece in. We humans haven't always had a clear grasp of the land on Earth. That began to change in the 1st century. Claudius Ptolemy, one of the most underrated thinkers of all time, I think, lived from 100 to 178 in Alexandria, Egypt. He was one of the first people to accurately use math to describe the size and curvature of the earth. Remember, this is a couple hundred years before the official contents of the Bible were settled on. Ptolemy invented longitude and latitudinal lines, allowing for navigation in the ancient world, including the Roman Empire. That mathematical basis was basically the framework for navigation at sea until GPS supplanted it about 40 years ago. It's brilliant until they lost it. For hundreds of years, Ptolemy's contributions were just lost. Medieval map makers based the size of land masses not on calculation, but on the importance of the different places. The more important the country was, the bigger it appeared on the map. They looked neat, but they were utterly useless. Finally, in 1407, Ptolemy's geographical measurements were rediscovered. Along with accurate maps emerged a whole modern scientific understanding that truth fit together, piece by piece, in one integrated whole. Mathematics, physics, astronomy, geography, biology, all the information, all the truth fits together like a great clockwork. In the realm of day language, there is no room for contradiction or paradox. There's a single truth toward which all discovery and research aims. Day language works because it's consistent. Night language thrives on mystery, even contradiction. A metaphor works precisely because it is not literal. Probably my favorite book about the Bible and early Christianity is by Brandon Scott. He specialized in understanding the parables of Jesus, comparing them across the different Gospels and from the various sources of the New Testament. He describes the parables and how they point to the power of night language. He writes, "The power of story is its ability to release and empower the imagination. In story, we can reimagine the world. We can be other than we normally are. Story doesn't just tell us about something that factually happened, it tells us about what could happen. If the story is rich enough and creative enough, if it dislodges the listener from her comfortable expectations, then a story can invite the hearer into a whole new process of imagination." Through his parables and metaphors, Jesus shocked audiences with unthinkable contradictions. In the prodigal son, we hear that in the family of God, welcome is not earned, but freely given. We hear a story about God that creates new opportunities for reconciliation, even by humbling God's self. These ideas would have been unthinkable to Jesus' peers. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, listeners are challenged by hearing that their Savior could come from the most reviled community. That's still really hard for us to wrap our heads around. The person that we most need for our healing may be one of those people. To us, the parables of Jesus sound probably folksy and a little confused. For his audiences, though, Jesus used stories with unlikely characters and wild depictions of the holy. His language uprooted traditional ideas. His stories invited listeners to reimagine a different social, religious, and economic world order. His stories ask the question, can you imagine a fundamentally different way of being with each other and with God? We Unitarian Universalists have a wide range of understandings about the person of Jesus and his role. What is clear, though, is that he was a master teacher and storyteller. Of course, Jesus was not the only teacher to shock or humor audiences. In our Time for All Ages this morning, we heard a couple of stories from Mullah Nasruddin. There's a whole treasure trove of stories that are either about him or that he theoretically told, literally thousands of stories involving him. Many different peoples claim him as their own, including Turks, Afghans, Iranians, and Uzbeks. The stories permeate much of the Muslim world, from the Balkans to China. He appears as the hero in these funny tales or satires. The Nasruddin tales can be understood on several different levels. That certainly holds true with the story of the lost key that we heard. Remember, he's digging in the dirt and people follow him digging in the dirt to find a lost key until the boy asks, "Are you sure this is where you lost it?" He explains the key is actually in the house. He's searching outside because there's better light. It's easier to see out here. Sometimes we find ourselves looking for life's treasure in the places that are easiest rather than the places that make the most sense. And sometimes we join in searching with the crowd without ever asking, is this the best spot, or is this the best way to search? Sometimes, often, an unassuming child has the question to unlock the needed insight. As I think about the different voices of wisdom, I'm really intrigued by the role that fools play. Whether that's Nasrudin or coyote trickster in American Indian traditions, or clowning, or fools in Shakespeare, or the court jester. Most cultures have a special place for the person who teaches great wisdom with their silly antics. Reverend Lynn Thomas Strauss offers high praise for the wisdom of fools. She writes, "Fools live on the margin, close to the people, on the ground. And fools hold up a mirror to the powerful. And wise fools are free of ego. They don't mind looking foolish, being wrong, making a scene, being unpopular, even thought of as losers. And yet they risk speaking to kings. Their role is to be a catalyst, to encourage change." Of course, they aren't just from long ago or faraway lands. The outcasts still offer their wisdom today. Drag queens and drag kings have been turning gender on its head and poking fun at patriarchy and racism and other traditions for generations. Writers of The Simpsons and South Park revitalized the art of satire, perhaps taking the place of Archie Bunker. I was a big fan of the Colbert Report. I found this week Stephen Colbert described his on-screen persona as, quote, "the well-intentioned, poorly informed, high-status idiot." And from that vantage point of the idiot, he offered great satirical wisdom. Of course, not all fools are on television or in stage. Some might be in our families, or our workplaces, or even our houses of worship. We UUs have had one foot in each of these ways of knowing for a long time. Drawing from sources of Christian tradition, science, world religions, and humanism, we use all of the wisdom that we can sweep together. I sometimes hear UUs speculate about levels of education, comparing us with other religious neighbors. You don't need to speculate. There are statistics. A 2016 study by the Pew Center tracked the average percentage of people with graduate degrees in varying faith traditions. About 77% of American Hindus have a graduate degree, followed by Unitarians with 67%. Among Jewish people, it's 59, Anglicans and Episcopalians around 57, Presbyterians have 47, and UCC 46. Another 2006 study ranked religious traditions about college education. The three groups that they pointed to at the top were Unitarian Universalists, Hindus, and Jews. Formal education can be helpful in the pursuit of knowledge. Good formal education teaches us to bring together different ways of knowing. It brings us up alongside wisdom. But friends, you do not get a big old bag of wisdom along with your diploma. Sometimes spending that many years with people who see the world through the same lens, people who value one particular way of knowing, can be really detrimental. Doctors are really good at treating bodies. but not always skilled at dealing with people. In church life, there's always a clear marker of people fresh out of seminary. Recent seminary graduates are so excited about what they've learned that they preach like a fire hose of vocabulary words. It is amazing how much Unitarian Universalists have invested in education, but we do ourselves a great disservice when we equate education with wisdom. Even more dangerous is the sin of dismissing our neighbors who haven't spent years of their lives in the classroom. Some of us seem to wonder, what could they possibly have learned out there in the world? Don't they know wisdom comes from books and teachers? Wherever it comes from, everyone, every single person has some insight worth sharing, some wisdom that would improve our lives. Before I wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about our personal relationship with day language or night language. It's probably fair to say that each of us has had a predisposition toward one of these ways of knowing. We're engineers or poets for a reason. It's great that we've become adept to a particular field. On the path to becoming experts, we may have squandered some of our birthright, though. From the earliest ages, we explored both day language and night language before we could speak. One of the earliest signs of human cognition is an infant's mimicking facial expressions, either smiles or frowns. From that very beginning, we seek to explore emotion and relate. Not long after that, we start exploring and experimenting the physical world, fascinated by shapes and objects and what does that taste like and where will it fit and what's going on out there. Our little curious brains desperately want to know the facts of how the world operates. There's so much potential there from the beginning. Sometimes it gets limited unnecessarily, though. Perhaps we're shamed in a classroom or told that boys don't do ballet or girls don't work on cars. Now, granted, those messages are changing, but they were in full swing when a lot of you were younger, I think. So what's your native language? Are you more comfortable with concrete facts and figures, or do you feel more at home with multiple meanings of poetry and metaphor and ambiguity? And are you comfortable with that? Are you willing to try a new language later in life? Maybe you depend on some good interpreter to get you through, often a spouse. Or maybe you have the skills you need, but if you have the time and the motivation, learning a new language can open up a whole new way of seeing and celebrating the world. Amen.